Hello everybody. This talk is a talk to JAG's parents, and I'm delighted that JAGs have been able to organise it, especially to Lizzie and Tina. Thank you so much for making the arrangements, and thank you to my wife Sue, who's overcome the technology. For us, this is a new experiment, or should I say endeavour, in getting my talks out. I do a lot of speaking in schools, and the new situation which we are all grappling with is such that we are all looking for new ways of doing what we used to do in the past. But thank you so much to JAGs for making this talk a reality and a possibility, and I'm delighted to be able to speak to you, although I love the interactions which come in normal talks, and I know that JAGs are making arrangements so that you can send questions, and I will be delighted to answer those questions as best I can. So the way that I want to talk about my experiences, and the message really is for you, is the message that I would have given your children, and for you to try to understand a little bit of where I'm coming from and what I'm trying to share with children, so that they can lead productive and happy lives. And the key thing really is, the message that I give them, is that it is their lives. And we as parents, we really are challenged to allow our children to develop into the human beings that they are. Now we all have, and I have two children, my son and my daughter, and I'm extraordinarily proud of them, and I have all sorts of desires and wishes and hopes and expectations for them, as you do for your children. And the thing is, we are so motivated for what we believe to be good for our children. But a lot of that is the way that we articulate what is good. So if we can talk about our children easily, then that usually is a good thing. But sometimes our children don't fit into those molds quite as clearly as that. Our children are looking forward to a long life. The sort of children that are at JAGs, and having got to the ages that they've got to now, they have a life expectancy in their 90s. And so here they are, they're just young teenagers, but they've got this long life ahead of them. And what they are preparing for now in their teenage years is these years and years. It'll be 75 years at least of life. And so often we think about in these short-term goals, GCSE, A-level, university, and maybe a little bit beyond that. But it's this long life of fulfillment, contentment, productivity, happiness. I often say that our goal should be a fulfilled life. And in that word fulfillment is so much which is bundled up in terms of intellectual development and academic success and work experience and financial rewards and families and children of their own. Soon we will all be grandparents, and won't that be lovely? We can send sick children back to their parents and remember the days when we had our own. But it's looking to this long life and not to the immediate short-term things. I want to choose physics because I like the physics teacher. It is a relevant criterion for a choice, but we need to look much, much further. Covey, in his 7 Habits book, talks about begin with the end in mind, and the end is not these short-term ends. The end is this long-term end, and then we reflect back on all of that. So that's really where I'm coming from, and what I have in terms of my life, I've been over the years and years, sounds as I'm getting quite old, but over the years I've developed a series of words. At the moment it's 9 words. For a long time I just had 6, and then I added 1 here and 1 there, and then I took 1 away, but at the moment it's 9 words. Now I haven't got time to discuss all 9 words with you, but I will discuss 3 of them. But these 9 words, what they do for me is that they help me really focus, and every day, without exaggeration, I can say that every day I will use at least one of these words. So as I find something and need to confront something, I pull out one of these words and it just points me in the right direction. So let me say a little bit about myself. You probably will have seen in the material that Jags has sent you a little bit of background on me. I grew up in Zimbabwe. My mum and dad were farmers there, so I grew up in the bush. I loved the bush. All I ever wanted to be really was a farmer, and to follow the same sort of life he had enjoyed. When I was a teenager, Zimbabwe was involved in civil war, and one of the things was that all of us were conscripted to national service. As soon as you finished school, you had to sign up for a year's national service in the military. There was a certain amount of choice as to which branch of the army you would go into, but you had to be there. So my grandfather, who had survived the First World War, he'd been at the Battle of the Somme, which he survived, and he survived every other battle, the major battle on the Western Front. He was an amazing chap. So when I went to the army, my grandfather said to me, look, you have to do this. There's nothing wonderful about it. So choose to do something which will teach you a skill or give you an insight that you would not find possible to gain if you were in civilian life. So I joined the engineers, and I thought, well, I'm not ever going to learn about explosives, so I'll go and join the engineers, and I'll learn a couple of other skills. We built bridges and we learned to do various other construction things, but most of our work was done with explosives. And you know how it is, you make these little choices without really realizing where you're going to. And I ended up in a small unit which specialized in finding landmines on the roads and defusing them and removing them, and a lot of these would be booby-trapped. And our real specialism was removing booby-trapped landmines. And what that is there's the main mine, which is usually some sort of anti-tank thing, which is perhaps 7 kgs of TNT. It needs quite a big pressure to set it off, but when it does, it makes a big bang, maybe puts a crater in the road as deep as my shoulders and wider than I could reach. It's a big bang. And if it goes off while you're fiddling with it, well, there's very few pieces of you left. But for a person to pick up, it's quite safe, unless it's booby-trapped. And so often, underneath, there'd be some little sort of device attached. So if you move the main device on top, the little device underneath will explode, and in sympathy, the main device would then also explode. And so that was my task, which seems like a crazy thing to do, but when you're 19, you sort of think that you're bulletproof. And you don't, you work through the dangers, and you think that with the training and your knowledge, and as you gain experience, you think, no, you can do this. And that's always dangerous. They used to move us from area to area every 6 or 8 weeks, because once you've been in an area 2 or 3 weeks and you're starting to work out who the person on the other side is and what he's trying to do, and there are always patterns to everything. And once you start to think you know the pattern, then you are at most danger, because then it's easy to become casual, and you start to take shortcuts and not look properly and carefully. And you really have to apply yourself. And in November 1979, I was just in that position. I'd been in this new area literally 2 weeks. I'd found a number of mines myself. Other people had found mines which I had gone to lift and diffuse. And they'd all conformed to the same sort of pattern. Underneath there was a device which was, I would say, twice as big as a hand grenade. But sort of hand grenade type thing. A lot of metal around a decent size piece of explosive, so that as it explodes there's a lot of stuff flying around. And so when I was called this one Monday morning, the 5th of November as it turns out, I had this premonition that this was going to be a challenging day. I made sure that I had my dog tags on, I made sure that I had everything neatly packed away, I had my spare explosives stored safely, and I went out to this device, and I initially, the initial things, I looked for all the familiar signs that I'd become used to in the 2 weeks up to then, and I couldn't find anything. And I looked, and I was very careful. I was very conscious that this is a time when you can easily make a mistake. And I looked, and I never worked so slowly, actually, as on that day. In fact, the chap who was in charge of the patrol, that was my protection, when I took a break, he came to me, he said, "John, are you feeling all right? Because you're not behaving in your normal way." And I said, "Well, I'm apprehensive because I think there's something not right here that I'm not seeing." So then I went back and I looked, and I must have just moved something, and what was underneath exploded. Fortunately, it had been buried more deeply than it needed to have been, and far enough so that it was too far for the sympathetic explosion to take place. So the main device on top, not only did it not explode and completely blow me to smithereens, but it absorbed a lot of the blast and a lot of the shrapnel. In fact, my commanding officer told me months later that it was amazing what was in the back of this, buried in the TNT. But there I was right there, not much more than an arm's length away. And just stuff below my knees and up my left-hand side, and from the top of my face, the top half of my face, was caught up in the explosion and the shrapnel. I was lucky. From that moment, though, all sorts of amazing things happened. The medic who was on that patrol, he knew exactly what to do. He had the wrong painkillers for head injuries, and he refused to give them, although his officer had gave him the instruction to. They called for a helicopter to evacuate me. None was available, but it just so happened that flying over was a light aeroplane tuned to the right channel, and he came on and he said, "I know where you are. I'm going to where you need to go to. I know that there's an airstrip near where you are, 300 meters down the road. All you need to do is get him 300 meters, and when you get him there," this pilot said, "I will be there, and I'll be able to take this chap. And my wife's in the plane, so she'll be able to look after him and keep him going." And when I got to Harare, to the main hospital, it just so happened that the top eye surgeon was on duty in accident and emergency that day. Sometime later I said to him, "Why were you there? Because you're an important chap." He said, "Well, I have to do 6 days a year in accident and emergency. And I just decided that day I would go to accident and emergency." Isn't that wonderful? There he was, exactly the right chap for me. No one could say whether I would see again or not. All they could say was there had been shrapnel in there, and they'd taken the shrapnel out. They just suck it out with a magnet. The way it goes in is the way they take it out. But as it turned out later, there was a lot of other stuff in there, grit and gravel and pieces of sand, and they obviously couldn't remove all that. And anyway, after 2 weeks, they unbandaged me. He said, "I think now all you have to do is open your eyes and tell us what you can see, and then we know what we're working with." A very scary moment. Just so happened that my mum was there at the time. Anyway, I said to the doctor, "Look, you've got to give me a few minutes," and he said, "That's okay, I'll come back at lunchtime." My mum said, "Come on, come on, come on." I said, "No, just..." I knew that by my bed there was a window, because I had been able to feel the sunshine coming in. And I opened my eyes after a few minutes, and I could see this rectangle of light, very fuzzy. And I got my mum to walk across it, and this very fuzzy, indistinguishable kind of shadow walked across and then walked back. And I wouldn't have known it was my mum, but just knowing that I could see that, it gave me hope. I could see. I wasn't totally blind. And for a year I was in rehab. I learned to walk again. I learned to do many things. And my eyesight, they just slowly got a good deal of eyesight back in one eye. The one eye that they weren't able to save anything. But enough for me to go to university. So after a year of rehab, I went to university as an undergraduate, and I loved that. It was just an amazing experience to have that liberation. And the reason it was liberating, and this is what I want to say to you as parents, the reason that it was liberating to me is that my parents didn't care what I did, so long as I was safe and so long as I was happy, so long as I was fulfilled. Because they were just delighted that I was alive. By all measures of reckoning, I was extremely lucky to be alive. And for them, that trounced any other concerns that they had. I could do anything. It was a wonderful thing for a young person that your parents, they didn't really mind what you did, because at least you're alive. You can think about your children. What would you be prepared to put up with just to have them alive? And here's the thing, your children are alive. And we should be able to put up with those things without having to subject them to the sort of trauma that I went through. But by human nature, we don't do that so easily. Sometimes we just got to get shocked and reminded. And so it's that liberation to be myself and to be able to do what I wanted to do, and I had to explain it. My dad would say, "Oh, I wonder why that's such a good idea." And I would say why I thought it was a good idea, and we'd have a discussion. But in the end, I knew that he was just delighted that I was alive. And in the end, he would agree that whatever it was fine. And I was very fortunate. An anonymous donor put up enough money to send me to university. He said it's the least he could do was to pay for something to make my life better. So my dad didn't have to pay. He was delighted that I was alive. And the only thing he said is, don't do agriculture, although you want to come back farming. Just do something else and get that richer experience, and maybe you'll end up doing that, which is more predictable than trying to farm when the rains do or don't come and the sun does or doesn't shine and the pests come or don't come. So I went to university. I thought I'd do maths, but that's much too complicated at university. I thought I would do physics, but I realized my eyesight wasn't good enough to do the lab work. And I met this amazing chap who was a computer scientist. And I ended up studying computer science, which I absolutely loved. And in the end, I spent 10 years doing computer science and ended with a PhD from Cambridge in artificial intelligence. And went back and then taught computer science for a while. And I don't know that I would have had the confidence to do that if I had not had the liberation that came from my injuries. Isn't that bizarre? And perhaps slightly sad. But I was brought up in a very traditional, very conservative kind of lifestyle, and out in the bush, there we were, just a few of us. I sort of reflected on my life as I've gone on, and as I said, I've developed these 9 words. The first word that I want to share with you is an old-fashioned word called honour. Honour is, to me, it is our core values. So, truth and integrity. Now, if we were in an auditorium, I'd ask you what you think honour is. And as I do the kids, and they will say all those things. They'll say it's truth, it's integrity, it's valuing other people, it's valuing myself. And I say, well, if you value yourself, what aspect of yourself do you value? It's fair play, perhaps. So I would say, so if truth is so important, when the person you love the most puts on an item of clothing and they say to you, does this make me look fat? And it does. Do you say, yes, it does? Or do you sort of hesitate for a moment? Or do you say, I think you look lovely? Or it's a difficult question. Remember the first time, your very first girlfriend, and she put on something, or your first boyfriend, and he put on something, and he said to you, do I look great in this? And it didn't really. Would you have told him? No, you look rubbish. We wouldn't. It's very hard to do that. So these are our core values, though. And somehow it's these core values that inform the way that we choose what to do in life. It's this honour, our core values. It's family. To what extent do we respect family? To what extent do we respect our friends? How important are our friends? Is it important to say to our friends, I'm prepared to go along with this, but I'm not prepared to go along with that? There's not much I can say to you about honour, because my core values are not your core values. And my core values are not your children's core values. They have to work these out. And our challenge as parents is to engage our children in enough conversation so that they start to identify what the issues are, and they can work out for themselves how important the truth is. So, is it important to be truthful? As a little sobering thought, there was a longitudinal study done in the US military some time ago. They looked at a whole lot of officers in their early training, and they did all sorts of assessment on these officers. And one of the things that they did was look at how honest they are, how truthful they are. And they gave them a score. And they followed these officers over their long career. And some of them became very successful. Some were chucked out early for bad behavior, for not making the grade. Some sort of got halfway and faded out a bit or got distracted. But what they saw was that the officers who got right to the senior ranks were those who were slightly dishonest. The ones who were extremely honest found it very challenging to keep going, because sometimes the straight truth is a hard story to tell. Those who are extremely dishonest, well, they got found out quite quickly and they were kicked out. But these people who are slightly dishonest, they could massage the story just to make it more palatable, to keep whoever it was going. And I've often wondered about that, because a lot of us would say that the truth is important, but it's the way that we say the truth, the way that we use the truth. Fair play is an important one as well. What is fair play? What is fair? What's fair for you? Is it always fair for me? What's fair for you? Is it fair for your children? What's fair for your children? Is it fair for you? These are difficult balances, and each of us makes our own balance in that. And the thing is, our children must make up their minds for themselves. We can force them in some ways to do these, but at some point they're going to live their own lives. And really, the best time for them to start living their own lives is in your homes, where you are there to pick up the pieces and to keep them safe. And not when they've gone somewhere else and there are not so many good people of such goodwill as you looking after them. Because we all make our mistakes, that's for sure. As part of growing up, we're going to experiment a little bit, and we're going to find things that don't necessarily work so well. So honour, all I can say is I'm a Christian, and my faith has really helped me a lot. I found my faith to be a great point of reference to go back to. We can be very sort of dogmatic about it and find ourselves in tight spots, but to look at our faith as a starting point, a point of reference, and a way to evaluate what's going on around me. And my friends find it sometimes strange when I say that even through all my injuries and all the rehab, I found my faith to be a great blessing and great strength, because it underpins what we have. I describe it as like a table. You put your food and knife and fork and everything else that you want, or your papers or your books, whatever you are, but you put them on the table, and that table is just always there. And so these core values are like that table on which now we're going to have all the paraphernalia of life. So that's the first word, is honour. What are our core values? And we really need to understand those core values, because it's on the basis of knowing what our core values are that we can make choices for our lives. But the second word, and I think the most important of my 9 words, is courage. Now, courage is, people say to me, John, look, it's easy for you can talk about courage, because there you are. You've been an army engineer, and your job was defusing booby-trap landmines. You've been that close to death. A little slip here or making the wrong move here, and it's like that. And that's true. It is a bit like that. But it's a technical exercise, defusing these things. There's a process, there's a training, you go through that, you go through this training, and it's a technical exercise. And the consequences might be dire if you make a mistake, but nonetheless it's a thing that you can think your way through. But in human relationships and in living life, it's not a technical process. It's not simple like that. And we really need courage sometimes to make ourselves go forwards. It's bizarre. I've just finished reading a book. This is a story of a lady. She walked the length of New Zealand, from the north of the North Island right down to the south of the South Island. 3,000 kilometers. There's a trail, which in Maori translates to the long walk. And it goes through the most extraordinary scenery and countryside. Wild and remote and rugged and tough and, just very challenging. And towards the end of the book there, she said the one thing that she learnt on this walk is bravery is something that we have to practice, and the more we practice it, the easier it becomes. And courage is like that. We have to gird our loins, and we've got to get a grip of our emotions and make ourselves do whatever it is we need to do. All of us have done that. To submit the application, to put up our hands and volunteer to do the whatever. Those of you with children who do drama and music, my last job I was a headmaster, and I really pushed people to engage in the performing arts of any kind, because to stand up on stage by yourself and do whatever is very challenging. You've got to really manage your own emotions, and it's an act of great courage. And the more we can get our kids to practice that courage, the easier it is to be courageous. The more we practice being brave, the easier it is to be brave, as Laura Waters said in her book Bewildered. But courage, and our natural thing is to try to protect our children, to try to make the burden easy and light and to smooth the way. But I'm not sure that we do our children a great service by doing that all the time. We need to encourage them and we need to promote them, but they need to make those choices, and we need to encourage them to kind of step, that little extra step, which is really challenging. So, and courage is one of those strange things. We all like to be told that we're brave or that we're courageous, but you can't be courageous unless you're scared. And none of us like to be scared. So when we feel that fear starting to grip inside our belly, and our chests start to tighten, and our breath starts to become a bit more laboured and we kind of recoil. But actually that's a wonderful moment, because you can say, here's an opportunity for me to practice being courageous. Here's an opportunity for me to show the courage that I've been practicing. And somehow in the safety of our schools and homes, we need to get our children to understand that and to do that. Because later in life they're going to need that. All of you who are watching, you've all had to do things which are scary. And the more we can do that, the more we can experience life, and the more we can push ourselves to do the things that perhaps we'd wish to do. But we kind of hold ourselves back because perhaps we'll look foolish. Maybe somebody will laugh at us. Maybe we'll fall and it'll be, we'll hurt ourselves. Perhaps this and that and all the... And somehow we've got to work our way, and each of us has to work our own strategy for making it less daunting, less intimidating, and to find a way of pushing ourselves forwards, to be courageous. So the second word is courageous. Courageous. So an example of where I use there, now my eyesight came back. I was able to go to university. I was able to teach for a while, and before I turned 40, my eyesight started, all sorts of complications started to set in. I mentioned that was sand and gravel still bits in my eye. And so I had to learn a whole lot of new skills. I started to lose my eyesight. So at age 39, I could no longer read and write. By then I was back farming with my dad. But quite soon after that, Mugabe decided that white farmers should be relieved of their farms, and that farms should be given to his supporters. And I was determined to stay in Zimbabwe. So now I had to, as my eyesight started to fade, to learn new skills, but also to find a way of earning a living and finding something to do in Zimbabwe. by some strange quirk of during the whole upheaval and all the politics, I managed to become a headmaster of an independent school, and what a fantastic, I mean, just the best job ever. But along the way, as I say, learning these new skills, making myself step out to walk into assembly with this, from one year to the next, I would see less and less and less. Standing up and giving speeches without notes. Just knowing what you had to say and trying to remember all the names of all the people you had to thank. Initially I had to learn to walk with my white stick, which I really disliked using a white stick, because you can find your way only because you're whacking into things. And when it's a brick wall, that's one thing, but when it's people's legs, it's not such an attractive thing. But now I have a guide dog, and I've had a guide dog since 2012, so I'm on to my second. And it really reminds me of how important courage is, because it's a real act of faith. You get hold of your dog by the handle and your left hand, and hold him by the harness somewhere by my hip, and you give him the instruction to go, and off he goes. Now you're walking down a route that you know, but nonetheless, you don't know what obstacles are there today. Somebody's parked on the pavement, somebody's left a bin on the pavement, somebody's dog poo is still on the pavement. There's a crowd of teenagers walking towards you and you know they don't pay attention. All of these sorts of things. And you just got to trust that this dog is going to find the way. And when the manhole cover is missing, you don't want to stand in it. And you just got to hold on to the belief and this working understanding that this dog knows that you don't want to step into it. And some days it's easy, and the longer you have this working relationship, the easier it has become. My first dog, I had him for 6 years, he was a fantastic dog. So some days I feel more emboldened, I just say to my dog, my new dog, and off we go. And other days I need to sort of say to myself, no, you've got to get out. If you don't get out, what kind of life is it? You can't just retreat into the small space which is your home. So it's that. So I just say to the word courage, and it just prompts me to do these things. So it's a real life lesson, and I use it all the time. And we need to teach our children somehow to learn the value of bravery and to give them the challenges and the opportunities to practice when it's safe to practice. So that when it's not so safe and when it is important, they are brave, they are courageous, and they do step up. Because there's this long life of fulfillment ahead of them. But they've got to go and get it, and they've got to make it, and they've got to engage with it. And we've got to let them, because we're happy they're alive. And my third word is patience. So in the same way as courage was getting a grip of your emotions and making yourself go forwards, for me patience is not a time thing. For a lot of people, patience is waiting time. It just takes time, and then things... No. I don't think of patience like that. I think of patience as being the other side of the coin, where courage is one side and patience is the other, is the opposite side. It's because it's also getting your grips. So when you engage in things, you're going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes. And how we respond to those mistakes is really the crucial thing. So I know that when I walk, I'm going to walk into things. In my house, I don't use my dog and I don't use my white stick. I know where everything is. I know that when I'm sitting at the dining room table, just across about that angle, there's the door to the hallway. And I just get up from my chair and I can walk to the door. But I don't always turn exactly the right way, exactly the right number of degrees. And sometimes I forget. Can you believe it? Sometimes I forget that I'm blind. And I don't put my hand out. And just before the door, slightly to the left, there's a corner on the wall, and it goes... We've got a slightly open plan kitchen further to the left. And there's this corner to the wall. And if I don't put my hand out and just check that I'm getting to the wall, it's easy for me to walk into the corner. And when we walk slightly leaning forwards. I never realized this till I was blind. You walk slightly, and when you hit something, you hit it with your forehead or your nose. When you walk into the corner of a wall with your forehead on your nose first, it's not pleasant. And it's so frustrating. You just want to hit the wall or kick the wall. And I mean, occasionally I have. And all that happens is you just get a sore toe. So now you've got a sore forehead and a sore toe. And it's that patience to sort of get a grip on yourself and to say, okay, this has happened. Now I've got to sort of turn myself around, pick myself up and start to face forwards again. And let that courage to step out. But the patience is not to throw all your toys out the cot and to just give up. But it's to try again. And for me, that's such a crucial thing, because our children and we in our lives, it's not smooth sailing all the way. We go on stage to give the concert and we make a mistake. And we're embarrassed and maybe somebody will make a comment. Or we go to the Eisteddfod and we get a poor score. Or we forget our lines in the play. Or we go to the, whatever it is we do. We go to the job interview and we make a hash of it. Or we submit our CV and we realize afterwards that there's a stupid spelling mistake or something. And these things that we practice and we can make perfect. But life is not perfect. And we do make these mistakes. But we have to get ourselves to go again. And our children, we've got to find a way of having our children practice that. Practice being courageous, but practice being patient in not just letting all emotion out and just saying, I'm never going to try that again, and stomping off in a huff. And even if they stomp off in a huff, we've got to find a point where we're going to turn them around and come back. It may be, look, everything we try isn't what's perfect for us. And it may be that in a cool, thoughtful moment, we'll decide, okay, piano playing is not the thing for me. I've lost a few of my fingers. So piano playing is not the thing for me. And that's okay. You have to decide. I'm not a worse person for that. But I can sing, so now that's something that I could develop. And it's those sorts of things. So it's our core values, and based on our core values we can make choices which we can be courageous about. And in going through life, using this courage to take us forward, to explore, to experience, we're going to make mistakes. We're going to fall short. We're going to be embarrassed. We're going to find people who are critical and negative. And that patience says to us is just to turn ourselves around and to pick ourselves up and to start going forwards again. And that's really what I would be saying to your children are those three things. And what I'm saying to you as parents is, and trying to share with you as parents, is that in my understanding, in trying to get them to have the best life that they can have and to live their lives according to their wishes and goals and desires, not according to yours or mine, but theirs, is that if we can teach them at least those three things, even if we can't teach them all the other 9 words, and maybe those three things will give them a real good start. And in the end, they're not going to use my 9 words or my 3 words or whatever it is. Everyone has to develop their own strategies. Each of you has a strategy for getting through your life. And you can share that strategy with your children, so long as you don't expect that they're going to take your strategy completely. They might use your strategy for a while, and then they'll manipulate it, and they'll organize it in a way which suits them better. And that's great. Isn't that fantastic? Because then it shows you that they are becoming real, true humans of value and purpose. And in that, there's great joy. So, thank you so much to Jags for the opportunity to talk, to share with you some of what I think and what I believe. It's a wonderful time having teenagers. I absolutely loved being the headmaster of a school full of teenagers, and I'm biased, but when I looked at my children, whatever age they were, I said, oh, this is the most fantastic time. But I did love having teenagers as children, because they're complex, they're challenging, they're intriguing, they're interesting, and sometimes indecipherable. But always there's this great purpose, because they're going to live way beyond where we live. and what are they going to be doing in that life? That's the real interesting challenge. So thank you so much to Jags, thank you to Lizzie and to Tina, and if I'm able to answer your questions, I very much look forward to that.